A tornado is about to hit an active supervolcano. What happens when this whirling column of air meets an outpouring of hot lava and ash? The results are devastating and terrifying. Would anyone survive this epic collision? And where is this most likely to happen? This is What If, and here's what would happen if a super tornado hit a super volcano. Okay, quick brain fact. Did you know that curiosity is one of the only emotions that actually rewires your brain in real time? The moment you lean in to understand something, like you are right now, your neurons start building new pathways. When you watch curiosity-fueled content like this, your brain treats it like active learning, decoding and making sense of new ideas just like it does when you solve a puzzle. So, watching our shows is literally good for your brain. Well, that's why we launched the Popular Science Fast channel, where you can stream all our shows 24/7. Tune in any time of day and you'll find mind-bending science from us and from some of the world's leading creators, including NASA's spaceflight, Hacksmith, and Complexly. Plus, live rocket launches, documentaries, and deep dive specials. It's basically a non-stop feed of curiosity, always on, always learning. We're currently available on 10 different platforms, including Vizio, Roku, and Plex, but we're just getting started. We're reaching tens of millions of homes and streaming devices all over the globe, and that audience keeps growing every month. And the channel just keeps evolving. We're adding brand new series and specials monthly, from breakthroughs in tech to space exploration coverage you can watch live. It's a front row seat to the new space race, alongside a 150-year-old legacy of science storytelling now being brought to streaming for the first time. So, if you ever finish one of these streams and still want more, well, you don't have to wait. You can jump straight into Popular Science and keep that curiosity going. It's there 24/7, ready whenever your brain wants its next aha moment. Before I get into exactly what would happen if these two natural disasters collided, let's take a look at what makes each of them so deadly. Twisters and tornadoes are vertical columns of air that extend from a thunderstorm down to the ground, and they're spinning very, very fast. They have an average wind speed of 48 kilometers per hour. Only about 1 in 5,000 thunderstorms give rise to a tornado. A tornado forms when warm air hits cold air. The warm air rises and winds whirl it around vertically. The most supercharged thunderstorms, called supercells, produce the most destructive tornadoes. Your average tornado is about 200 meters wide, and luckily for us, these things don't move very far. A tornado might only travel for about 10 kilometers before dying out. But, like I say, that's an average tornado. With a more destructive EF5 tornado, wind speeds can reach a deadly 320 kilometers per hour, launching debris as far away as 65 kilometers. Okay, now that we know what kind of twister we're dealing with, let's see what happens when it meets a volcano. Then we'll up the stakes and see just how crazy things can get. Could the tornado whip up the lava from a volcano and create a fire tornado? Let's say a tornado is traveling at 48 kilometers per hour toward a volcano. Well, not much would happen. It would just skim over the surface and quickly die out. But what if the wind picks up? Well, then things can get action-packed pretty quickly. For instance, take the eruption of Mount Kilauea in 2023. While there wasn't a massive super-volcano type of explosion, a series of eruptions pushed millions of tons of lava into the crater. The temperature was 1,200 degrees Celsius, giving rise to a hot wind that swirled about like a mini tornado. This whipped up chunks of lava and rocks. Now, if an EF3 tornado had developed right over this volcano, it would have destroyed everything nearby. This tornado's wind speed would be 200 kilometers per hour, violent enough to uproot trees and flatten buildings. This isn't just any old tornado. It would be a vortex full of hot rock and lava. And if you happen to be near it, well, you'd be hurled around and smacked in the face with scorching debris. While in the background, the dark crater would be cracked with fissures and the lava would be pouring in. At least you'd have a scenic ending. But how about another scenario that's devastating in a different way, where a super outbreak meets a supervolcano? What's a super outbreak? Well, it's a series of violent tornadoes sweeping through a long corridor of land. These tornadoes can reach speeds as high as 320 kilometers per hour and are capable of killing hundreds of people. Now, let's see what happens when we combine one of these with a supervolcano eruption. A supervolcanic eruption is thousands of times more powerful than a regular volcano. This would be something like the eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano in Wyoming 2.1 million years ago. Just the volcanic eruption itself would be devastating. It would spew huge amounts of ash and debris into the air, burying neighboring states in 1 meter of ash. This is dangerous stuff made up of broken rock and glass. In fact, the entire Midwestern United States would be shrouded in volcanic ash and dust. This much ash would kill plants and animals, cause roofs to collapse, and cause electrical equipment to fail. Now, if an EF5 tornado happened right on top of the supervolcano, well, the volcanic eruption would be enough to overwhelm the tornado and snuff it out. But what if the tornado came right after? What if the supervolcano erupts, throwing an enormous amount of lava and ash into the sky, and then a super outbreak kicks off nearby? A series of rapidly spinning, violent tornadoes would suck up the debris in the atmosphere. Ash, molten droplets of lava, rock, glass, and dust would all be whipped up into a frenzy. They'd tear through the environment, uprooting trees, flattening buildings, even destroying high-rises. Instead of having the elements of a volcano stuck in one spot, it would now be traveling, destroying everything in its path. Plants, animals, and any unlucky human beings would face a horrific death. If you were caught in the middle of it, you'd be thrown about, spun around, and blasted with sharp shards of debris. Now, even without a tornado tearing through, ash from a supervolcano spreads as far as 3,200 kilometers away. That's the distance between Yellowstone and New York City. A string of tornadoes would pick up and disperse this ash even more effectively, another 1,600 to 3,200 kilometers, creating a hellstorm all over Earth. You'd see a series of gray spinning funnels tearing through the countryside, shadowed against an orange sky, tearing up homes and buildings while blasting them with ash. But the destruction doesn't end here. Molten volcanic particles raining down on Earth can give rise to another frightening phenomenon: a fire tornado. Fire tornadoes are rapidly spinning columns of hot gases, smoke, and fire. When you're faced with a fire tornado, a normal tornado with its simple wind and rain droplets is starting to look pretty good. Fire tornadoes can occur in two different ways. Molten droplets raining down on forests can cause forest fires. The drier the forest, the higher the temperature. Then, bidirectional winds could then whip up the fire into a tornado. Or a fire tornado could start within the volcano itself. This is what happened in Iceland when the Little Ram volcano erupted in the Reykjanes Peninsula in August of 2023. Intense heat from the volcanic eruption heated the air above, causing it to rise. The wind patterns then whipped it into a column of fire, creating a fire tornado. Now, how likely are these scenarios anyway? Well, volcanoes can give rise to fire tornadoes like in Iceland, or a wind vortex like in Hawaii, but can super tornadoes run into erupting volcanoes? The good news is that scientists tell us the possibility of this happening is very, very, very rare. In fact, there's no instance of an independently occurring tornado colliding with a volcano. This is because these two phenomena develop in different geographies. Tornadoes develop in the plains, which are typically far away from mountainous regions, where we find volcanoes. The one place where they both tend to happen is Italy. So watch out on your next holiday. You don't want pasta with a side of impending doom. So maybe you're somewhat safe from a tornado-volcano matchup. But there is one deadly situation that has happened before, and that's a hurricane colliding with a volcano. In 1991, Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines erupted, sending ash 40 kilometers into the air. This was a cataclysmic eruption. It lasted from April till June, getting more and more violent. If you were in the area, volcanic rocks 5 to 13 centimeters wide would rain down all around you. The countryside would be covered in volcanic ash. Repeated eruptions transformed the landscape into a monochromatic ash color. Ash fell as far away as Indonesia. 60,000 people were evacuated in a 30-kilometer radius. Now, at the height of the eruption, a typhoon passed 75 kilometers north of the volcano. A terrible combination of typhoon rains and floodwater mixed with the ash from the volcano. If you had a house nearby, this thick sludge would settle on the roof, making it collapse. 50,000 homes were destroyed in this way, and about 850 people died. Surprisingly, one good thing came out of the typhoon-volcano collision. Hydrogen chloride that was pumped out of the volcano could have reacted with chlorine in the atmosphere to destroy the ozone layer. But because of the typhoon, this was washed away in rainwater. The typhoon worsened many of the volcano's effects, but in this one way, it saved Earth. So we're pretty lucky that tornadoes and volcanoes don't usually happen in the same place, because you'd hate to be caught in that situation. Today, we're dropping a massive bomb into the Mariana Trench. But we're not stopping there. We're also going to nuke a hurricane and a volcano. What happens when you drop one of the deadliest weapons known to man into the world's greatest natural wonders? Let's start our nuclear experiment by dropping a nuke into the Mariana Trench. How would you deliver a nuke to the bottom of the Mariana Trench? What would this underwater explosion be like? And what kind of destruction would it cause? This is What If, and here's what would happen if we nuked the Mariana Trench. Welcome to the deepest, darkest depths of the ocean. The Mariana Trench is located in the western Pacific Ocean, just 360 kilometers away from the island of Guam. You'll be traveling down 11 kilometers to Challenger Deep, the deepest point of the trench. Here, you could stack about 30 Empire State Buildings on top of each other before hitting the surface. You'd be among the brave few to venture into these high-pressure, pitch-black, and near-freezing waters, joining the company of scientists, a naval officer, and even filmmaker James Cameron. But you'll be carrying the most precious cargo of all, the biggest nuclear bomb ever made. Okay, wait, before you worry about what would happen if you exploded a bomb at the bottom of the trench, you'd want to figure out how to get it there safely. If a bomb accidentally exploded near the surface, it could be dangerous for many people. You could think of it as a massive nuclear tsunami. Waves hundreds of meters high, spreading out in all directions. This could create a hazardous situation for the islands neighboring the Mariana Trench, like Guam, Japan, or the Philippines. Luckily, these waves would behave differently than your regular tsunami waves. They would break earlier. That means they'd be smaller and less catastrophic when they reached land. But still, better to avoid this crisis and get that bomb safely down into the trench. To do this, you'd have to protect it from extremely high pressures. At the bottom of the trench, the pressure is so high, it would be like having 100 adult elephants on your head. You'd want to use a special pressure vessel to transport the bomb. just like Operation Wigwam. In 1955, the United States detonated a bomb at a depth of 600 meters. It was twice as powerful as the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The explosion generated a massive bubble across the water, and deadly radioactive contamination spread across 13 square kilometers. But your bomb would be the largest nuke ever created. More like the Tsar Bomba. This nuclear weapon was over 3,000 times more powerful than Little Boy, the bomb dropped on Nagasaki. And you'd have to take it much, much deeper than the Wigwam test. At the moment of detonation, a bubble of hot steam would expand rapidly. In just a few seconds, it would cover an area of about 1 kilometer. On the surface, you'd see a massive bulge in the water. But it wouldn't reach great heights. That's because you would detonate the bomb so deep that the water pressure above would cause the bubble to collapse. But within a few seconds, that bubble would shrink, then start to expand outward again. This expansion and contraction would continue for 3 or 4 cycles. This would leave the water turbulent, hot, and mixed with radioactive debris. At least no neighboring coastal cities would have to worry about being wiped out by a tsunami. But you certainly wouldn't see the effects ending there. The increased temperatures from the explosion could create intense hurricanes. And the turbulent waters and radioactive material would have adverse effects on marine life. There would be mass casualties from the explosion. And deep sea fish could be blinded by the bright flash of light. Over time, you could see unexpected or surprising effects on the ecosystem near the detonation site. There are corals as big as cars after the 23 detonations at the US nuclear testing site on Bikini Atoll, not to mention an abundance of aquatic animal life. But you could see mutations of marine life after a while. Now, that's what would happen if we nuked the Mariana Trench, but let's move our nuclear weapons from the sea all the way to the sky. Let's nuke a hurricane. Every year, about 6 hurricanes reach the United States, with effects ranging from heavy winds and some flooding to the decimation of communities, destroying homes and taking lives. Instead of bracing for impact with our sandbags and survival kits, what if hurricanes never hit land at all? What if we could stop these hurricanes by nuking them? How would we do it? Could this cause a nuclear apocalypse? Or would a bomb even stop a hurricane? This is What If, and here's what would happen if we nuked a hurricane. But first, what exactly are hurricanes? Well, they're massive storms that form over warm ocean water near the equator. Hurricanes are tropical storms. The water they form over needs to be above 26 degrees for them to work. This warm water creates humid air, which then gets thrust upwards by tropical winds to create storm clouds. Lighter winds outside the clouds steer them and help them grow. This cycle keeps happening until the storm has winds of at least 119 kilometers per hour. At that point, it's called a hurricane. They're usually about 160 kilometers in diameter and can be nearly as large as the state of Texas. Oh yeah, and did we mention that these things can last for days? You definitely don't want this coming to your home, so let's nuke it. Believe it or not, the idea of nuking hurricanes isn't new. It's been proposed for decades, dating back to the 1950s.
The idea works like this. A submarine would travel underwater to below the eye of the storm. Once there, the sub would launch the nuclear bomb, creating an explosion intended to blast out all the hot air and bring in cold air, which is denser. The cold air would slow down the wind and stop the hurricane. Okay, we have our nuke and are ready to launch it. There it goes. And, well, nothing happened. The hurricane is still there. That can't be good. The reason nothing would happen is because of the amount of energy a hurricane produces. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the heat released from a hurricane is equal to a 10 megaton nuclear bomb exploding every 20 minutes. In 1990, all of humanity used 20% less energy than a single hurricane produces. So the average bombs of today would hardly make a dent on a hurricane. Not only that, the hurricane would carry all that radiation, plutonium, and other civilization-destroying materials from the air down to the land. As if a regular hurricane wasn't bad enough, we'd now have a radioactive one. As it moved across America, it would destroy cities with its wind and water while also dumping radiation on them. Okay, let's try this again. This time, we'll use an even bigger bomb. And we mean really big. To have enough energy and force to stop a hurricane, you'd need more than 100 atomic bombs. But to keep it simple, let's pack all that power into one giant bomb. If we released such a massive bomb, it would surely stop the most epic of hurricanes. But once the dust settles, you'd quickly realize that you destroyed most of the Earth in the process. So, whichever way you attempt it, nuking a hurricane is not a good idea. And, unfortunately, the number of hurricanes continues to increase. Researchers say that the warming of the oceans due to climate change is a reason why hurricanes are getting stronger and more frequent. And no, we can't nuke that problem either. So, nuking a hurricane is a terrible idea. Okay, for our last hypothetical experiment, let's try putting these nukes to good use by detonating them inside of a volcano. What happens next? Volcanoes. The ultimate natural force of destruction. They're unforgiving, uncompromising, and unstoppable. About 1,500 volcanoes around the world are considered to be active, with more than 10% of them in the United States. Is there any way we could stop them before the destruction begins? Could we literally fight fire with fire? What if we nuked an active volcano? Would it solve the problem? Or make it way worse? This is What If, and here's what would happen if we nuked an active volcano. Volcanoes are as cool as they are terrifying. They are an incredible force of nature, capable of destroying our lives on their path of destruction. But could we give them a taste of their own medicine? How could we nuke such a fiery inferno? Well, we'd need to bring out the big guns. The nuclear bomb dropped on Hiroshima, Japan during World War II was the equivalent of over 130 million kilograms of TNT. That had plenty of impact. Could we use something like it to blow a volcano to smithereens? First, we'd have to figure out the target. While it's difficult to predict when a volcano will erupt, there are some warning signs. Watch for things like tiny earthquakes, releases of steam and other gases from the volcano's mouth, and bulging from the sides. Sounds like my last date. That being said, whether the volcano will erupt is still a massive educated guess. So let's say that our scientists locked on to an active volcano that's ready to blow. It would be a miracle if they could coordinate with the military fast enough to try and stop it. Ideally, we'd be able to predict it a few days before the volcano was about to explode. This would provide more than enough time for people to pack up their belongings and evacuate without causing the kinds of highway traffic jams we see during hurricanes, tsunamis, and other disasters. With everyone out of harm's way, geologists, volcanologists, and weapons experts would determine any weak spots on a volcano's sides that could be hit effectively. Next, a highly trained crew of pilots would fly over the volcano, drop their payload, and get the heck out of Dodge. If things worked perfectly, as in if they used the exact right amount of explosives and hit the perfect spot in exactly the right way, the top of the volcano would crumble into itself, keeping the magma mostly underground. There might still be some seepage around the base of the volcano, but it wouldn't be anything like how the eruption would have played out naturally. But if we're being honest, it would be like trying to put out fire with gasoline. Geologists warn that trying to bomb a volcano might actually make things worse. A lot worse. The explosion of the bomb, mixed with the buildup of pressure inside a volcano, could amplify the eruption. The force would release even more ash and lava, spreading it even further than it would have gone with the volcano's own power. And that's if we managed to hit the target. If the nuke missed its target, there's still a nuclear bomb being dropped in an area where people live, or at least near enough that they would feel the effects of the radiation. If you had to pick one, which would you choose? Death by lava or nuclear destruction?
Nuclear war, aliens arriving on Earth, a deadly bioengineered virus. These are just a few of the terrifying possibilities that could take place in 2025. Will any of these wipe us humans out? Which scenario has the highest likelihood of causing destruction? And hey, what are some of the good things that could happen in 2025? The world in 2025 sees multiple wars taking place. Wars in the Middle East and Africa rage on, but maybe even more worrying is the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Russia has vowed that if long-range missiles launch from Ukraine and strike deep into the heart of Russia, this war will turn nuclear. There are even reports of a planned deployment of a nuclear weapon in space. In an age where multiple countries have nuclear weapons, mutually assured destruction has held check on a full-on nuclear war breaking out. But it's possible that this will end in 2025. If one country decides to deploy a nuke, it could launch a domino effect that quickly spirals out of control. Depending on the size and number of the weapons used, the destruction could be devastating. If the weapons struck the heart of big cities like New York, millions of people around the blast radius would be vaporized in white-hot fires. Millions of others who manage to escape immediate death will suffer horrific long-term consequences, radiation sickness and cancer. Dense black smoke would envelop the globe, causing temperatures to fall and a nuclear winter to set in. This could last up to 10 years. The only silver lining? We put the probability of this actually happening and creating worldwide destruction at 11%. Even if a nuclear weapon was released, it wouldn't necessarily become a world-ending scenario. Okay, so maybe it's not a nuclear war, but it seems more and more likely that we will see a world war. World War III. Over the past few years, we've seen how conflicts between two countries can morph into something more global. Russia and Ukraine are at war, America and the EU have been supplying weapons to Ukraine, and now North Korean soldiers have been enlisted to fight on the side of Russia. The Middle East war has stretched beyond Israel and Gaza to involve other countries in that region as well. As players align with one side or another, this could all snowball into a potential World War III. If World War III were to break out, how would you be affected? Well, if you're a young male, your country might need you to serve. Depending on where you live, you might have to leave your home entirely. Some European countries could be at risk of an invading army, while America, surrounded by water on all sides, enjoys a natural advantage. But these days, the nature of warfare has changed. Enemy drones carrying bombs might come buzzing around crowded cities, and their bombs might be launched from faraway cities. Our advice? Head for the hills, and by that we mean get out of cities that might be prime bombing targets. Even if you do this, though, your life will be upended and never be the same again. Based on the current state of geopolitical politics, we put the likelihood of World War III destroying humanity at 38%. But if war doesn't kill us in 2025, maybe a virus will. Not necessarily one that Mother Nature makes, but a bioengineered one. For instance, the H5N1 strain of the bird flu virus is deadly. It could kill over 50% of humans unlucky enough to catch it. Imagine that, half the population of the world getting wiped out. Thankfully, humans can only catch it from close contact with infected birds, but scientists trying to study the way this virus spreads have created a bioengineered version that spreads through the air and is far more contagious. And that's not the only case of bioengineering. Scientists have recreated the flu virus that killed 40 million people in 1918. They did this by digging up frozen dead birds from the Arctic and reviving the virus. While these efforts are being done to ultimately help prevent people getting sick, they are high risk. There's a possibility these lab-grown viruses could infect a researcher and then spread among the general population. If this were to happen, it would be like COVID-19 all over again. But depending on how deadly the pathogen is, it could be much worse. COVID had a kill rate of 3.4% of infected people, but something like that bird flu virus, you'd be saying goodbye to over 50% of friends who caught it. There'd be widespread panic as this statistic got out. People would be hoarding groceries and locking themselves up indoors indefinitely. Some infected people might start drinking bleach or taking ivermectin to save themselves. Other people might believe the entire thing was a hoax and refuse to take any safety measures. Sound familiar? With a virus that kills 50% of those infected, governments would declare national emergencies to try and keep people safe. In the meantime, scientists would be working around the clock to come up with a vaccine. If we faced this kind of an outbreak in 2025, at least we'd have some experience from COVID on how to go about creating a vaccine. But to be safe, I'd say keep an emergency kit of masks, bottled water, and canned goods, because we think the probability of this happening and ending the world is 30%. Alright, instead of a bioengineered virus, maybe Earth will face a completely different threat. One that comes from outer space. You know which one I mean. An alien invasion. According to the Drake equation, there's a 53 to 99.6% chance that humans are the only life in the Milky Way. 53% that we're alone? Well, that's 47% that we're not alone. Aliens could definitely be out there. The question is, why haven't they shown up yet? Aliens could be out there detecting our existence in a number of ways, from the dirt in our atmosphere or potentially even the oxygen, carbon, and water vapor our planet carries. However they do it, if aliens did find their way to Earth in 2025, there are a couple of possibilities. One, they're hostile to humans. They want to be our evil overlords and extract our resources and brains. But on the other hand, maybe they're just a bunch of touchy-feely, friendly creatures with big eyes and funny floppy ears. The humans would only know after we communicate with them. Let's consider this scenario first. Governments would want to avoid widespread panic, so they'd probably declare an emergency telling citizens to stay home. Then, they'd work out how to communicate with these newly arrived creatures. Meanwhile, they'd likely be working behind the scenes to mobilize military technology. In case these aliens end up being hostile. What would happen if they were? Well, maybe they'd beam some of us Earthlings into their spaceship, or launch an alien bioweapon to make us all weak and defenseless. If they have tech that's far enough advanced from ours, well, we wouldn't stand a chance. And let's face it, if they've made it to Earth, their tech is pretty advanced. A good thing we think the probability of this playing out next year is a mere 1%. So maybe don't worry about becoming an alien's breakfast. But life on Earth could be destroyed by the one force that humans can't control. That's Mother Nature. 2025 could be the year a super-volcano erupts. I'm talking about Yellowstone. Yellowstone National Park is bang on top of a supervolcano site. The site has seen 3 eruptions. The first was 2.1 million years ago, throwing 2,500 cubic kilometers, that's 600 cubic miles of volcanic material. So what if 2025 is the year this massive volcano erupted again? If you're living in the United States, then good luck. States around the site would be hit with a massive amount of hot lava, volcanic gases, and a seriously big layer of ash. But it's not just nearby American states that would suffer. The effects of a supervolcano eruption would be felt worldwide in the form of a prolonged nuclear winter. The ash and carbon thrown up into the atmosphere will block the sun and cause temperatures on Earth to fall. Plant life will be affected, crops will fail, famine will break out. These effects can last for years, even a decade. The only good news in all of that? Well, we think that the probability of it happening is 0.00014%. Okay, I think it's time to think of some more positive scenarios. After all, this is a new year, and there's only so much doom and gloom that I can deal with. The good news is, not all the news about nuclear is bad. Nuclear is some of the cleanest power available. No fossil fuels are burned, no carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere, which means our global warming situation doesn't get any worse. Now, due to the worsening climate crisis, nuclear power solutions are emerging once again, and in 2025, they may get a big boost. Right now, the use of AI is crunching up a lot of energy that's being generated by burning fossil fuels. This is dangerous because it's heating up our planet, and AI has a voracious appetite. It needs power to run through its calculations. But with huge amounts of energy being provided by nuclear power, we could use AI with abandon to crunch away and find cures for diseases. We could travel into space and solve pretty much any problem we want. We could use AI to figure out how to harvest all the energy reaching Earth from the sun, transforming us into a Type 1 civilization. We can use this energy to power flights to Mars. The galaxy becomes our oyster. If these efforts take off in 2025, well, we'll start blazing the trail to our fantastic new future without increasing carbon dioxide emissions. We give the probability of this taking off 35%. But how else can we change our climate? Maybe the billionaires could help out. That could either be a very positive thing or it could be the end of our planet. Let me tell you why. The idea is simple. It's a bit like the Yellowstone supervolcano eruption, but happening in a much more controlled way. It's a plan to combat the 1.5 degrees Celsius, 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit rise in temperature that at this point is written into our future. How would it work? Well, it would involve a few rich people deciding to address the climate crisis on their own. They'd load up some aircraft with chemicals that would scatter the sunlight away and inject these into the atmosphere. The only problem, we don't know what would happen next. Scientists can do all the calculations they like, but in the end, there's an element of uncertainty. It's possible that the billionaires attempting to geoengineer the climate might upset the delicate balance of climate and ecology today, leading to further catastrophe, natural disasters, crop failures, and famines. The chance that billionaires hack the climate undetected by the authorities, well, we put it at 23%. But I'm not sure billionaires are going to do much more in 2025 other than just roll around in a bed of money. Maybe let's drop that lower. Okay, time to come down from the clouds. Maybe 2025 will be the year we figure out how to remove excess carbon dioxide from the air. without destroying the planet. I'm talking about using the power of carbon-eating bacteria, a new type of E. coli. E. coli usually makes us very nervous because there are some strains that cause food poisoning in humans. But E. coli is a lab scientist's favorite because they multiply easily. Well, in 2019, scientists created a version that eats carbon dioxide. The way they did this is by depriving E. coli of carbon, which it needs, while at the same time making carbon dioxide readily available. As new generations of E. coli evolved, they started using the carbon from carbon dioxide to grow. If this did work, maybe we'd build E. coli farms that would work to remove carbon dioxide and clean up our air. Maybe we wouldn't have to worry so much about burning fossil fuels. So, will E. coli be harnessed for carbon dioxide removal at scale in 2025? Well, while the research is promising, there's still work to be done. So, we're going to put the probability of this happening at just 9%. Okay, while solutions to fix the climate crisis are being worked out, laundry and dishes still have to be done. Plus, driving, gardening, cooking, and walking the dog. The tasks of everyday life are endless. Will 2025 be the year when robots get fully integrated into our lives? Will they finally do all of our chores? Well, we already have some of this stuff, like robot vacuum cleaners and self-driving cars, but what would really be nice is a single robot that takes over all the boring household chores. Is that in the works? Well, Dyson has invented a robo-dog, a four-legged robot that can vacuum, mop, and blow away leaves and mow the lawn. A robot from Stanford called Mobile Aloha can put away pots and chairs, clean up, and even cook food. If these robots were to merge together, life would be a blast. Each household would get an all-purpose robot. Soon enough, we'd all have one for ourselves. Mine will be doing the stuff that I find a total drag. Maybe we'd even have robot girlfriends and boyfriends. Now, what's the probability that a 360-degree all-purpose robot comes together in 2025? We give that a probability of 28%, depending on whether we expect it to bake cookies or not. Now, if AI could do housework, well, for sure it could help us find a cure for diseases, right? 2025 could be the year when we finally figure out how to use AI to find the cure for everything. Today, 25% of kids and young people don't get diagnosed with type 1 diabetes until they're much older. AI has been used to figure out if a kid is likely to develop diabetes in the future by scanning their medical records. This could help with proactive management. AI is also helping scientists transform the way they deal with cancer. Doctors are increasingly using AI to figure out whether or not you'll get cancer in the future. In this kind of situation, your regular annual blood test may become a full body scan with an AI smart enough to differentiate between real risks and false positives. You won't have to be worried if you have something because personalized treatment will be worked out for you. But privacy will become a major concern. You'll want to protect your health status as you get to know about any health risks way ahead of time. And costs will be a major problem as this kind of intel doesn't come cheap. We give this type of future a 15% chance in 2025. Okay, we're pretty excited that AI might help figure out a bunch of diseases in 2025, but meanwhile, another disease is spiraling out of control. Will 2025 be the year that humans turn into zombies? Zombie deer disease is spreading like wildfire among, deer, elk, and moose. It leads to the death of brain cells, forcing the diseased animal to walk all crooked and look like a zombie. Could this zombie deer disease spread to humans? Well, so far there are no reports of humans biting others, so thank goodness for that, but the entire world would likely go into a full-blown panic mode if human zombies emerged. People would stop hunting deer and moose and elk, that's for sure. Governments would spring into action and cull the populations of these beasts. And anyone who's eaten any wild game might have to get tested for zombie disease. Good luck with that, deer hunters. We don't know for sure if this is in our future, but with diseases increasingly crossing over from animals to humans, who knows? We'll put the probability at a whopping 5%. Okay, so maybe we'll dodge the zombie bullet, but will 2025 be the year a massive geomagnetic storm hits Earth and threatens our very existence? The probability of a geomagnetic storm is 100%. The sun itself has a solar cycle where periods of high activity alternate with periods of low activity. And the peak of solar cycle 25 is going to hit us in July of 2025. During this peak, more solar flares and sunspots will appear, increasing the chance of solar storms. A powerful storm can wreck our infrastructure on Earth, causing blackouts. It can also damage our satellites in space and disrupt aircraft communications. On the bright side, here on Earth, we'll get to see beautiful auroras in the night sky. But is this potential damage to communication systems a serious threat? Thankfully, with modern technology, we can detect upcoming problems and plan ahead. So, probability of storm, 100%. Probability of humans getting destroyed, 0%. Now, even if the sun doesn't create a massive storm to blow things up, well, eco-terrorists might. As new climate catastrophes emerge, more and more people are growing angry at the way our governments are handling them or not handling them. This could make way for forms of eco-terrorism. People might go out to destroy infrastructure like oil fields or other operations that are harming our environment. Will these acts of eco-terrorism destroy humanity itself? Well, since the goal of these groups is ultimately to save the Earth, that's unlikely. So we put the probability at 11%. But they can cause some serious damage if they think that's the only way to get things to change. If eco-terrorists don't destroy humanity, maybe AI will. AI leader Sam Altman has warned us against the power of AI. And as users of ChatGPT, we've all seen it hallucinate and make things up. Well, AI could be used in a number of terrifying ways, from spreading misinformation to maybe even being weaponized. Countries could make the next superweapon with the power of AI. This is a real and frightening possibility. Will 2025 be the year AI destroys us? It could be. We put the probability at 50%. If AI doesn't destroy us, will life on Earth be wiped out by another planet crashing into us? How about Mars? Well, if Mars came crashing into Earth, life would be over. There's absolutely no chance any of us would survive. As Mars veered out of its orbit and careened into us, tsunamis would rise on Earth. We'd experience massive earthquakes. At the moment of impact, a massive amount of heat would be generated and both planets would get liquefied. The good news? This is 100% not going to happen. You can most definitely cross this off your 2025 predictions list. Now, instead of all this death, let's talk about life. New moms and dads will have a tool at their disposal to ensure their brand new baby emerges A-OK. Whole genome sequencing is a test that can be done on a fetus to understand what's driving any emerging health conditions. Today, only a few specific genetic tests are done before a baby's born, but by sequencing the entire genome, doctors can proactively prepare for and treat any rare condition that might have gone undetected. The probability of being able to do this in 2025? It's 95%. Now, technology won't just be sequencing your baby's genome in 2025, it'll be able to read your mind. Using AI, scientists found a way to map neurons into a translation of people's actual thoughts. But on the bright side, for anyone who has a disease that affects their speech, being able to communicate through thoughts will be a valuable tool. People like stroke victims or those with Parkinson's. But if you're a criminal, well, you might have a problem. Forget about lying to the police or a judge about where you were on the night of the crime. They'll be able to read your mind. This technology combines an fMRI scan, which looks at where blood is flowing in your brain, with our old friend ChatGPT. But there's a challenge. In order to have mass deployment of this technology, you'd have to put MRIs everywhere. It's kind of expensive. But cost aside, the probability that this technology is ready to go in 2025? 75%. But it'll take a while before it dominates the entire world. Okay, now if this was a little scary for you, then let's up the stakes a bit. What if an asteroid hit Earth? Then you'd have much bigger problems than privacy. If you're thinking, but doesn't NASA track all the asteroids? Sorry, that would be a no. NASA does track most of the asteroids, and they know where most of the really big ones are. By their count, they've mapped 90% of them, but that still means 10% of them are out there unaccounted for. If a massive asteroid slammed into Earth, it would be like when the dinosaurs were wiped out. A massive explosion on Earth, sending dust and ash up into the air. This creates a nuclear winter that could lead to mass extinction. Luckily, we don't think that this is all that likely. Probably less than 5%. Okay, instead of destroying, let's talk about rebuilding. Rebuilding by rewilding. This is when landscapes that have been destroyed by human activity are restored to their original lush state. Will the major powers of the world embrace rewilding in 2025? We think that's a possibility. Rewilding is already happening in many different parts of the world. It's big in Ireland, which is committed to increasing forested areas from 11% to 18% by 2050. The probability that this grows across the world in 2025? We think that's 80%. Okay, for our last prediction, we want to end on something hopeful. Space exploration gives us hope that even if life gets snuffed out on Earth, we can maybe live elsewhere. And a trip to the moon is always the first stop. Will 2025 be the year of another moon landing? Well, maybe not a full landing, but in September of 2025, a flight around the moon is planned. This is NASA's Artemis mission. A crew of 4 will do a flyby around the moon. Originally planned for 2024, there were issues with the battery, ventilation, and temperature control that had to be resolved. So, what's the probability that humans will fly around the moon next year? We put it at 65%. 66 million years ago, this asteroid crashed into Earth and wiped out most of the life on our planet, including the biggest, baddest things that ever roamed the Earth. Yeah, dinosaurs. If a rock this size hit us today, well, humans would be on the brink of extinction. Today, we look at the 5 deadliest asteroids to hit Earth, either in the past or in the not-so-distant future, and we slam them into Earth all at the same time. Spoiler alert, Earth does not win. We'll start with the smallest rock on our list, the Barringer asteroid. And then we'll build up to an asteroid that was much, much more massive than even the Chicxulub that wiped out the dinosaurs. But before we get there, here's the thing about space rocks. They aren't some rare event. They barge in from space and hit Earth all the time. Most of these rocks are tiny meteoroids, just a few grams in weight, but they come in fast. These small meteorites slam into Earth at tens of kilometers per second. Lucky for you, they burn up almost instantly thanks to our planet's home security system, our atmosphere. But sometimes, Earth gets hit by a way more serious rock, and damage can be catastrophic. Let me take you back 50,000 years into the past. Earth was deep in its last ice age when suddenly a large space rock entered the atmosphere. This is the Behringer asteroid. For millions of years, it was minding its own business in outer space, and then suddenly, on a perfectly ordinary day in what we now call northern Arizona in the US, this 50-meter wide chunk of iron and nickel, that's 165 feet in diameter, this chunk came tearing into Earth's atmosphere at over 15 kilometers per second, 9 miles a second. And just seconds later, it slammed into the ground with a force so powerful, it was like setting off a line of nuclear bombs. The shockwave flattened everything as far as the eye could see, and the asteroid left a massive crater for us to remember it by. Now, what if this asteroid hit us today? Well, it would be just as devastating. If the Behringer asteroid hit Earth near a major city, that'd be total destruction. This 300,000-ton bullet from space would explode with the energy of 10 megatons of TNT. It would flatten skyscrapers in an instant, shattering glass for miles. Even if you weren't at ground zero, that's the exact point of impact, you'd still feel the power of its shockwave. The blast would deafen you, and the heat would, fry you. The ground would shake as if a 7.5 magnitude earthquake had just hit. The Behringer wouldn't be a world-ending asteroid, but it would change the world for everyone nearby. Now, since we want to keep things exactly as they happened on Earth 50,000 years ago, this space rock would hit exactly where it hit then, in the middle of a desert. As long as you're not a tourist or a hiker exploring the arid expanse of Arizona, you'd be fine. Still, this new Behringer asteroid would leave a new crater. A crater that's big enough to fit the Burj Khalifa inside of it. This is what today's impact would look like. If you were watching the impact from the nearest town over, Winslow, Arizona, you'd see the kilometer-high cloud of ash and fire rising from the impact site. About a minute after impact, just as you think you're safe, the sonic boom would reach you, knocking you to the ground and shattering all the windows around you. It would be huge, but still, not a leveling a city to the ground kind of impact. Okay, while the Behringer asteroid is raising a plume of smoke and ash in Arizona, something bigger and deadlier is about to smash into South America. Astronomers first spotted asteroid YR4 in December of 2024 using the Atlas system in Chile. And let me tell you, this rock almost gave us a heart attack. By the way, Atlas stands for Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, so that should give you an idea of why this discovery was so terrifying. At first, it looked like YR4 had a 3.1% chance of hitting Earth on December 22nd of 2032. Now, that may not sound like much, but in asteroid terms, that's alarm bells territory. Scientists worldwide scrambled to refine its orbit, and as more data came in, they were able to bring that number down, first to 1% and eventually to even less than that. Now it's something like a 0.001% chance. Yeah, but that's still more of a percent chance than you ever want to hear. Of course, here on What If, we always imagine the worst case scenario, so fast forward to 2032 and cue the impact. The thing you need to know about YR4, it's big. At a length of about 60 meters, that's 200 feet, it's about the size of a jumbo jet. And this intruder from space wouldn't even need to touch the ground to cause serious damage. Yeah, instead of directly hitting Earth, YR4 would explode overhead like the Tunguska event did in 1908 in a remote area of Siberia. This rock would explode like a deadly firework and level the city beneath it. Buildings would collapse and only reinforced bridges would remain standing. Barely. Predicting exactly where the asteroid would hit is difficult, We have to take into account Earth's orbit, the asteroid's trajectory and speed, just for starters. It might land somewhere in the ocean. Wouldn't it be more epic if it landed on land? Say in northern South America? Yeah, our deadly space traveler would land in Bogota, Colombia. Bogota, Colombia is a city of over 7 million people, tucked high in the Andes, but its elevation isn't going to save it. The skies over Bogota would light up as if the sun had suddenly moved in for its close-up. Then, about 10 kilometers above the city, that's about 6 miles, YR4 would detonate in a massive airburst. It would release the energy of about 15 megatons of TNT. That's 1,000 times more than the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. The shockwave would rip across the city in seconds, flattening buildings, snapping power lines, and throwing vehicles up into the air like toys. If you were caught outside, first you'd be blinded by the flash and then knocked to the ground by the blast wave seconds later. Fires would break out across entire neighborhoods, and glass and debris would turn into deadly shrapnel. The destruction wouldn't stop at Bogota's city limits. The Andes would echo with the sound of the explosion. Dozens of kilometers away, windows would shatter. Nearby towns would feel like they'd been hit by a massive earthquake. Power would be out for millions of people. Communications would fail. This is where the chaos kicks in. But since the asteroid didn't actually strike the ground, well, there wouldn't be a crater. Instead, the city would be marked by a burned, flattened zone where the blast hit the hardest. It wouldn't be the end of humanity, but for South America, it would be remembered as the day of the scorched earth. Now, if something like YR4 was on a collision course with us, well, we wouldn't be completely defenseless. NASA has already tested a planetary defense strategy called DART. That's short for Double Asteroid Redirection Test. The idea isn't to destroy the asteroid, but just to redirect it while it's still in space. NASA tested it in 2022 by deliberately slamming a spacecraft into an asteroid moon called Dimorphos, and it worked. When you're dealing with asteroids, even a tiny course correction years in advance can mean the difference between a harmless flyby and a direct hit. I'd still feel safer if YR4 had a 0% chance of hitting us in the first place. But it looks like it might just hit the moon instead. What a relief. And as if South America didn't have enough to deal with, another big strike is coming its way. Oumuamua is a special rock on this list because this was the first ever interstellar object that we saw enter from interstellar space. Like, it came from outside the solar system. And it was weird. Oumuamua isn't your average round asteroid. It's what scientists and I call cigar-shaped. It's 10 times longer than it is wide. We've never seen anything like it until we saw this in 2017. At first, it looked like a comet because it accelerated in a strange way, almost like it was being pushed. But scientists would never see a comet-like tail, which made things awkward. Now, it could be a fragment of a larger rock. It might have exotic ices in its composition, like hydrogen ice or nitrogen ice. Or it may even be an alien-made object, something they've sent to explore our little planetary cluster. Either way, this elongated rock is about to slam into us. First, Oumuamua would hit the top of the atmosphere, speeding at about 20 to 26 kilometers per second. For a moment, it would look like there was a second sun over the Amazon. Hey, somebody give this guy a speeding ticket. But in just a moment, it'll crash into the rainforest with about 1 gigaton of energy. A new crater will be torn into the basin. A crater from this monster would be no joke, about 4 kilometers or 2.5 miles across and 600 meters, 2,000 feet deep. Everything inside that bowl would vaporize. The shockwave would race outward, snapping trees like matchsticks and lighting the canopy on fire. From above, The world's green lung would turn into a ring of brown and black. Towns far beyond the horizon would feel the shockwave as a hard shove and a long roll. Ash would be falling from the sky. For days, it would be snowing charcoal. Oumuamua launching itself into Earth wouldn't cause an extinction-level event, but it would definitely be a blast that the planet would remember. The Amazon River would run hot and cloudy with ash. Air travel would be diverted for weeks, and across the northern part of South America, crops would get less light under an ashy sky. We're not quite at the level of dinosaur extinction yet, but we're getting there. Over in Mexico, the big celebrity herself is about to destroy everything. This is the most famous asteroid out there. The boulder with the smolder, the world-ending Chicxulub. 66 million years ago, this rock, or more like this mountain, smashed into Earth on the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it was a mountain. Chicxulub measured at least 10 kilometers wide. That's 6 miles in diameter. That's bigger, much bigger than Mount Everest. After Chicxulub hit, Earth was never the same. First came the fireball that ignited the forests. Then the shockwave that circled the globe. A lot of dinosaurs were killed immediately, but not all of them. After the Great Fireball came the Great Blackout. The Chicxulub impact spewed dust and ash into the sky, blocking sunlight. For years after the impact, our planet was plunged into darkness. Many plant species died, and when the plants went, everything that fed on them went too. This was the most recent extinction event in Earth's history. The dinosaurs never stood a chance. But now, this monstrosity is coming to end you. Yeah, if this devastating rock were to hit the Yucatan Peninsula today, it wouldn't be the dinosaurs going extinct. It'd be you. At first, a bright star appears in the sky over the Gulf of Mexico, but it's too bright and it's moving too fast. In less than a minute, it would grow to the size of a blazing sun. Then, the impact. The blast would vaporize everything in the vicinity. The ground would shake for hundreds of kilometers with the energy of a magnitude 10 earthquake. Coastal towns would turn to white-hot ash, and the skyscrapers of Cancun would collapse from the shockwave. Cue the massive tsunami. Within hours of the impact, not one, but multiple tsunamis would be roaring across the Gulf of Mexico. Walls of water 100 meters high would slam into Florida, Cuba, and Central America. Less than 48 hours later, these huge waves would reach Australia. Back in Mexico, fires would rampage. There'd be a thick, choking cloud of dust and ash, sulfur everywhere. If somehow you survived the impact, you wouldn't be able to breathe. Look, the dinosaurs didn't survive this story 66 million years ago, and if Chicxulub were to strike again today, humanity wouldn't either. Not because of the first flash of fire, though that alone would cause a lot of casualties, but because of the long, cold night that follows. In the weeks after Chicxulub, the world would fall silent. Smoke and dust would block out the sun. Earth would be plunged into a cold twilight. Soon, the food chain would begin to collapse. Famine would spread faster than relief could keep up with it. In just a few months, humanity would be living in chaos, struggling to survive. Years later, if you were still around in some sort of Last of Us scenario, you'd be walking through an unrecognizable world. Forests would be gone, coastlines redrawn, and entire species would have vanished forever. Okay, that was devastating. The smaller asteroids on this list we could recover from, but this one? Yeah, that's not looking good for humanity. Or any anity. Animal anity, plant anity. But wait, that wasn't even the biggest impact? It gets worse? What's worse than that? Okay, this one is from a really distant past, when Earth was young and very different from the Earth you know now. Let's go back 3.3 billion years ago. This is the Paleo-Archean era of early Earth. This is when our planet was mostly a water world, with some early continent-like landmasses scattered around. There was barely any oxygen in the atmosphere, and with no ozone layer, the sun bathed Earth in lethal radiation. But that's okay, because there was basically no complex life here. Only some single-celled organisms like cyanobacteria drifting in the ocean. Then came S2. This space rock was absolutely devastatingly massive. Yeah, about 200 times more massive than Chicxulub. So if you can imagine, the impact was enormous. S2 plunged into the shallow seas near what's now called South Africa, and it changed the world forever. But it was actually kind of good for Earth. Sure, there were humongous tsunamis ripping apart coastlines across the planet and stripping debris from the ocean floor, tossing it into the atmosphere. The surface layers of the oceans boiled away and heated up the atmosphere. Molten rock rained down from the sky. But this was the kind of shakeup Earth needed. You see, this impact stirred up iron from the depths of the ocean. And this was a good thing, because now the seas suddenly became full of nutrients. All kinds of bacteria and microorganisms went through a baby boom. After the impact, early life really started to flourish. But that doesn't mean this massive impact would be good for us today. If S2 hit near South Africa, it'd be game over. For all of us. Now, I could stop right there, but let me give you some details. A fireball the size of a continent would rise into the sky. As S2 violently smashed into Earth, it wouldn't just vaporize water and rock, it would tear the seafloor apart. Yeah, the impact crater would stretch for hundreds of kilometers. Earthquakes, 100 times stronger than anything recorded in human history, would rip across the globe. After that, well, you know the drill. Tsunamis, a barrage of flying molten rock, blocked sunlight, the collapse of ecosystems, followed by extinction. Of us. All of us. Following this, Earth would change again in ways we can't even predict. A total reset. You for sure are not surviving this one. Now, if only one or two of these asteroids hit Earth at the same time, we could still make it, but add Chicxulub and S2 into the mix, and it doesn't matter how many relatively small impacts you survive. No one survives meteorite S2. You wouldn't notice it at first, but every second, the air around you is thinning, little by little. After 30 seconds, you're gasping. Engines fail, hospitals go dark. By minute 2, planes are crashing, oceans are suffocating, and the sky is turning deadly. If Earth started losing 1% of its oxygen every second, this is exactly how fast the world would end. But how long would it take until we completely run out of oxygen? Can anything survive in a zero-oxygen world? And is there hope for humans to someday repopulate Earth? Okay, so the first few seconds after the oxygen starts disappearing, things wouldn't be so bad. After 10 seconds, there's still 90% as much oxygen as there was before. Maybe you'd get a feeling that the air you were breathing was a little thinner, as if you suddenly decided to hike up Mount Everest. And if you actually ended up on a mountain that high, it would feel even worse. At 5,500 meters, there's already only half the amount of air available as there is at sea level, and now there'd be 10% less oxygen available. So if you were hiking up these heights, you'd be huffing and puffing even more. And if you were an elite athlete, well, your body would be extremely sensitive to changes in the environment. You'd feel exhausted from things that would normally come incredibly easy to you. If you're not in those scenarios, well, maybe you wouldn't be panicking, but there are some people who would. Meteorologists, earth scientists, and anyone monitoring the atmosphere. They would instantly notice the bizarre readings coming in from their instruments. In the time that it takes them to call each other or report an emergency to the government, another 20 seconds would have passed. And going from 21% to 19% oxygen was nothing, but in the next 20 seconds, things are going to get a lot worse. 30 seconds have passed since oxygen levels started dropping, and now 26% of Earth's oxygen is gone. We used to have 21% oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere and 79% nitrogen. Now, with a quarter of the oxygen gone, it only makes up 16% of the atmosphere. What does that mean for you? Well, you definitely notice the difference. You're suddenly gasping for air, taking in bigger lungfuls, and hyperventilating or breathing much faster. You might be standing at sea level on the streets of New York, but your lungs feel like you're on a high-altitude climb. The only folks who might feel okay, well, they're the ones visiting from high-altitude cities like Aspen, Colorado. This city sits at 2,500 meters above sea level. Living at high altitude for years, their bodies would have already acclimatized to lower oxygen. So if they're wandering about at sea level, they'd be able to handle the 16% oxygen level. Anyone doing hard labor feels like they have to slow down. Construction workers find sweat pouring down their faces as they try to breathe harder. Factory workers operating heavy machinery might find they're less coordinated and accidents might go up. In hospitals, things might get ugly. Sick people who are already suffering from breathlessness would feel worse. Someone with heart failure, stroke, or arterial damage would already be suffering from a lack of oxygen. Now they'd have even less. Their hearts would beat faster in a desperate attempt to get more oxygen to the body. But this won't work because there's just not enough oxygen available in the air. Because less oxygen is reaching their brain, they'll become confused and some of them will die. And it's not just humans who would be suffering. Birds would start falling out of the sky. Birds depend on the 21% oxygen level in the atmosphere. They have extremely high energy needs as it takes a lot of power to beat gravity and stay flying in the air. Now, to meet these high energy needs, birds have evolved to extract 25% more oxygen from the air than us mammals. But with the sudden drop in oxygen, they'd run out of energy and would find themselves dropping out of the sky. Well, what about plants? Well, maybe you think they'd be okay, as all they do is take in carbon dioxide and make sugars. But plants breathe in oxygen too, just like us, and they use it to burn food to get energy. The drop in oxygen would force them to use alternative paths to get their energy. Now, maybe all this stress would make you want to have a relaxing campfire, but no luck there. Less oxygen means fires would be sputtering or no longer able to burn. This could also mean that electrical grids would go dark. Without electricity, trains would come to a halt, traffic signals would stop working, emergency signals would start to blare as automated warning systems get activated. After hearing from scientists, governments around the world will have issued the highest levels of security alerts. Cable news anchors will announce the emergency even as they struggle to breathe. Governments may assume that it's a highly coordinated attack on their country until they see that it's happening everywhere around the world. Presidents and prime ministers will get hooked up to oxygen if it's available, but they'll be panicking as they see everyone around them struggling to survive. Out on the roads, people will start yelling and honking their horns. There'll be massive traffic jams on the highways. But why? Well, the standard combustion engine is designed to run using air that has 21% oxygen. With that percentage dropping to 16%, well, the engine can't provide the power that's needed. People will be getting out of their cars, gasping for air, and walking away. Guess we should have bought electric. Oh, it won't just be car engines that are failing. Engines in airplanes won't function properly either. Engines usually compress the air at high altitudes to extract enough oxygen to make the fuel burn. But
At this rapidly depleting level of oxygen, there's not enough to help burn the fuel. The seatbelt light comes on, emergency air masks drop for the hyperventilating passengers. Air traffic controllers will see a flood of calls coming in, requesting permission for emergency landing as engines start to fail. Or even worse, planes will start falling from the sky. And it's more than just cars and planes. Anything that uses a combustion engine is in trouble. Powerboats and ships start stalling in open waters. Excavators can't dig the earth, and bulldozers come to a grinding halt. And the problems will only get worse. Okay, you're now a little past 1 minute, and a horrifying 50% of the oxygen in the atmosphere is gone. If you were gasping for breath at the half-minute mark, well, you and everyone else around the world are now feeling a whole lot worse. Everyone is breathing faster now, breaths coming short and shallow. With oxygen concentration in the air down to 11%, humans are fighting to survive. You look at yourself in the mirror and your lips have turned blue. There's so little oxygen reaching your brain that it can't function. Your thinking is warped and your judgment is poor. You want to pick up a phone and dial your loved ones, but you can't make your arms and legs move the way you want them to. You stagger out onto the road. What you see makes you realize the end of the world is here. It's the apocalypse. Emergency sirens are going off with no one to respond. People are staggering or lying unconscious in the street. As you look up into the sky, you see planes falling down toward Earth. The dwindling supply of oxygen has pushed engines to complete failure. 1 minute wasn't long enough for pilots to pull off emergency landings. You crawl back inside to avoid being hit on the head by falling debris. The scarce few patients hooked up to oxygen in hospitals are still breathing, but they see the oxygen levels depleting on their cylinders and they're overcome with fear. The doctors and nurses who tended to them, they're in no shape to look after them anymore. Now, is there any good news in this scenario? Well, forest fires that were smoldering half a minute ago are now completely out. There's not enough oxygen for even hot coals to glow, let alone a forest fire to burn. Now, at this point, there's another change taking place. With less oxygen in the air, well, atmospheric pressure has dropped. Less pressure on the ocean waters means that they start to release dissolved gases. Dissolved oxygen starts to leave the ocean, so there's less for the fish to breathe. This degassing will affect all the ocean's creatures. When the ocean loses oxygen, they'll be struggling to breathe. Ocean creatures breathe oxygen that's dissolved in water, but now that there's less oxygen, they're all gonna die too. Okay, that's what's going on in the oceans, but what's happening up in the sky? Well, the next part of our environment that'll suffer from a drop in oxygen is the stratosphere. Now, the ozone layer is made up of oxygen, where 3 atoms combine to form a single ozone molecule. But a severe drop in oxygen means that the ozone is depleting. And as the ozone gets destroyed, harmful UV rays from the sun will strike Earth. These rays cause cancer and cataracts in humans. Anyone gasping for air on the beach suddenly feels the sun's rays burning into them, even stronger than before. The only good news is that at the rate that the oxygen is disappearing, well, they won't be around to see any of the harmful effects that have happened to their bodies. Okay, another whole minute has passed, and the oxygen level has plummeted even further. Now, 70% of the oxygen in the atmosphere is gone. The concentration in the air has gone from 21% 2 minutes ago to a mere 6%. As the level drops to 6%, humans and animals will begin fainting and falling to the ground unconscious, their faces turned ash-colored. If this 6% oxygen concentration were to last only 4 or 5 minutes, well, there would be some hope for anyone who's still alive to recover. If it lasted 6 minutes, 50% of us would survive.
But it's not going to last another second, because every second there's less and less oxygen. Humans, animals, plants, everything is dying everywhere. It's the biggest mass extinction event the Earth has ever seen. Just like 550 million years ago, when a sudden drop in oxygen wiped out 80% of life. Oxygen has disappeared from the deep waters of the ocean, killing off animals that live on the seafloor. The plankton that produce fresh oxygen to replenish our supplies are rapidly dying themselves. The massive infrastructure that humans have built on Earth is crumbling. There's no more electricity being generated from fossil fuels, because burning coal or gas needs oxygen, which is gone. When everything else is dying, weirdly enough, solar and hydroelectricity continue to generate. Water is still flowing, and solar cells don't need oxygen. Earth has clean energy at last, but just with no one to use it. But it gets even worse. This catastrophic event isn't just an exercise in holding your breath. No, this is a complete wipeout of everything on Earth. It's not just oxygen in the atmosphere that's going away. Every molecule of oxygen on Earth is disappearing. That means the oxygen atoms that bind with hydrogen to make water, oxygen that's part of the Earth's crust, and oxygen that's in concrete holding our buildings together. The oceans are becoming a sea of hydrogen as all the oxygen escapes. Earth's crust crumbles into silicon and carbon, and oxygen from concrete disappears. It can no longer bind together, causing all the buildings on Earth to crumble to dust. Okay, 8 minutes after the start of this catastrophe, 99% of the oxygen in the atmosphere will be gone. From 21% of the atmosphere, oxygen now will make up less than 1% of the air, and less than 1% of our bodies, the crust, and the environment. All living things will be dead. It's not just that they can't breathe anymore, their bodies will literally fall apart as oxygen disappears. The human body is 65% oxygen, and along with the buildings, human bodies will become a pulpy mess as oxygen disappears everywhere. There's no coming back from these scenarios. Plants, humans, Earth, everything will be destroyed. Is there any way Earth could recover from this massive 8-minute deoxygenation? No, not if we removed oxygen from every single compound on Earth. Not for billions of years, at least. But let's rewind a little to a slightly less horrific scenario. What if oxygen only disappears from the atmosphere? Could the Earth recover in that scenario? Well, if that's the case, for starters, our buildings would still be standing. Phew. Hello, Colosseum. And some living creatures would have survived, because there are some bacteria that survive without oxygen altogether. The anaerobic bacteria. These were the first ones to emerge on Earth billions of years ago, and with this rapid oxygen depletion, it's almost like we've gone back in time. Conditions are perfect for them to multiply. But what about the rest of life? How about if we flipped a magic switch at this point, so there was a big reversal and Earth gained 1% oxygen every second? Well, in a little under 8 minutes, the Earth would be right back to where we started, 21% oxygen. Unfortunately, there would still be a whole lot of dead people, animals, and dead plant matter everywhere. But wait a minute, let's take a closer look. Not all the animals may be totally dead. There are 2 that have been seen to go without oxygen for quite a while and still live. First are cockroaches. They've been known to live after being submerged in water for up to 40 minutes, so there's a good chance they're coming back to life when we flood the Earth with oxygen again. Then there's the naked mole rat. It can survive up to 18 minutes without oxygen. Now, in addition to these, there's another type of creature that may have survived. It has a useful trait. It can switch back and forth between oxygen-rich and oxygen-deficient environments. tell you the exact scientific term, they're called facultative anaerobes. If oxygen is available, they breathe like us humans do, but if there's no oxygen, they switch to fermentation. Either way, they survive. So it's possible that Earth would also still have these kicking around. Some bacteria, some yeasts, some fungi, and even some invertebrates in the ocean. One of the aquatic invertebrates with this double survival advantage is a type of segmented worm called a bristleworm. Now, if we waited for life to evolve from anaerobic bacteria, we might have to wait for billions of years. After all, it took 2.5 billion years for humans to evolve from cyanobacteria that first time round. And there's no guarantee that that evolution cycle will take place the second time round. At least not on Earth, which is becoming rapidly more inhospitable. More about that in a minute. A more promising path to Humans 2.0 is from the multicellular creatures, maybe the bristleworms or the naked mole rats. After millions of years of evolutionary cycles would lead to a second coming of humans. Assuming, of course, that the cockroaches don't take over the Earth. But there's a time constraint. Earth is not going to remain the pleasant place it is right now for billions more years. In a mere 600 million years from now, Earth is going to be a whole lot hotter. The sun will be 6% more luminous, and the amount of solar radiation hitting Earth will go up a lot. If new life forms evolve from what's left, well, they'll have to adapt to survive on a planet that keeps getting hotter. With this heat in 600 million years, there'll be no more photosynthesizing plant life. The intense heat of the sun will drive the removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, making photosynthesis impossible. Then, in another 400 million years, that hot sun will make our oceans evaporate. With no water, it's going to be very hard for even roaches to survive. Well, I'm pretty happy we're not losing 1% oxygen every second. Even if we gain it back, human life on our beautiful blue marble would pretty much be destroyed. And if it's not oxygen yo-yoing back and forth, well, the sun can have a pretty horrific effect on Earth as it ages and heats up more. Underneath Antarctica's ice, there's a deep, dark secret. Today, we're going to melt all that ice to find out how it would transform Earth. What mysteries lie buried deep under its thick, frozen surface? As the ice melts and sea levels rise, what would happen to our coastal cities? And why might this lead to some unexpected diseases? This is What If, and here's what would happen if all Antarctica's ice suddenly melted. Welcome to Antarctica, the continent that encircles the South Pole. It's 40% bigger than Europe and full of ice. Here you'll find seals, whales, penguins, and the odd scientists doing some research. And on this continent, you'll find an ice chunk the size of Florida. Welcome to the 120-kilometer wide Thwaites Glacier. Its more scary nickname is the Doomsday Glacier. When it melts, there will be a catastrophic rise in sea levels all over the world. Now, this Doomsday Glacier is melting incredibly fast. It sheds 50 billion tons of ice into the ocean every year, and it accounts for 4% of the 9 inches of sea level rise that's happened so far. Some scientists are predicting that the whole thing might melt in decades rather than centuries. But we don't even have a few decades to hang around, let alone centuries. So I'm going to show you what happens if it melts a whole lot sooner, in seconds. In just a few seconds, Thwaites has melted and flowed into the Southern Ocean that surrounds it, and from there into the Indian Ocean, the Atlantic, and the Pacific. Sea levels rise by 60 centimeters around the world. The streets of San Francisco are getting flooded. Miami and New Orleans are also rushed with water. But what's going on? Why did this glacier crack and break away from the rest? Well, there's something going on underneath. Beneath Thwaites is a massive river flowing fast. Melted ice from the iceberg is feeding it. This is happening thanks to geothermal energy from the Earth's molten interior. The melting process starts off slow, but eventually huge chunks of ice break off. This starts a chain reaction, causing more and more ice to break off and melt. And there's more to it than just one river. A whole world of mysteries lies beneath the ice of Antarctica. But before I take you to that fascinating underworld, I want to tell you about why Antarctica is so important. It's an ice sheet covering an area of 14 million square kilometers, with an average thickness of over 2 kilometers. Just for comparison, that's 1.5 times the area of the United States. That is a staggering amount of ice, 25 million cubic kilometers of it. It's 90% of all the ice on the globe, and locked up in that ice is 60% of Earth's fresh water. Now, unlike the Arctic, where the ice is floating on water, there's land beneath the ice in Antarctica. You don't think about it because 98% of the land is covered with ice. And that's not all. 1.5 million square kilometers of ocean is also hiding underneath this ice. And when all this ice melts in a few minutes, sea levels are going to rise an astounding 70 meters. We'll see what this epic meltdown does to Earth in a bit. But first, I want to show you the bizarre creatures we're discovering inside this frozen landscape. As you explore this uncharted territory, you'll get a peek at the ocean floor, and just above you, you'll see the underside of the ice. Here, you'll find a type of marine life called anemones. These tiny little creatures are burrowed into the underside of the ice. You'll also find some other small fish and crustaceans. The anemones you find are going to be very different from what you'd find normally in the ocean. They're a new species with an unusual trait. See, anemones usually stay rooted to a single spot, kind of like a plant, but these Antarctic anemones wriggle about in the water. Scientists are still figuring out where they're trying to go. Okay, almost nothing grows in that cold darkness, right? So, what are these creatures eating, and how are they surviving? Well, it's probably little bits of plankton and poop ferried in by ocean currents, but they're also eating something that's super weird and kind of gross. It's the ocean equivalent of rotting food in the back of your fridge. These creatures are eating millions of year-old rotting skeletons, bodies, and ancient bacteria that were around when Earth was much warmer. Ooh, watch out! A few more massive glaciers are about to break off. As the neighboring glaciers to Thwaites separate and melt, more water pours into the oceans. Worldwide, sea levels rise another 2.5 meters. Cities on the east coast of the United States are covered in water. Boston, New York, Miami, millions of people are affected. Even as cities are getting submerged, something bizarre would be going on right off the coast of Antarctica. Close by, the sea level would actually be falling as all this ice was melting, while the sea level further away would be rising. Now, why would this strange event be happening? Well, remember, the Antarctic ice sheet is enormous. It weighs a mind-boggling 24 billion megatons. So it exerts its own gravitational pull on the surrounding waters, which raises the sea level nearby. But when the ice melts, the power of that gravity is gone, so sea levels nearby fall, just as they're getting higher elsewhere. Over in the east end of Antarctica, the Denmark and Scots glaciers have melted. This adds another 1.5 meters of water to our oceans. Now, at a 4-meter rise, the United States is now losing national monuments. The Jefferson Memorial is underwater, Fenway Park is submerged, major coastal cities around the world are also flooded. Shanghai, Lagos, Mumbai, Jakarta, ports are flooded and destroyed. And all that salty water is flowing into farmland and destroying our crops. Even worse, underground aquifers that give us drinking water are now contaminated with saline spilling over from the ocean. What's scarier is that the contamination runs deeper than just salt. The Antarctic ice carries bacteria that have traits that are dangerous to human beings. Some of these bacteria cause infections, and they're linked to diseases like cystic fibrosis. But it gets worse. They have an even more deadly superpower. They're resistant to the antibiotics we use to treat diseases today. If they exchange parts of their genes with the bacteria of our world, the resistance to drugs will only grow and spread to even more bacteria. At this point, we humans would be toast. We'd no longer be able to fight off bacterial infections. Not good if we're drinking contaminated water. But like any Hollywood villain, these bacteria also have a good side. They can help us create new and better antibiotics. They can help clean up toxic waste sites and maybe even be part of a new biodegradable alternative to plastics. As more and more ice breaks off and melts, other ecological systems are getting thrown out of whack. For one, the melting ice is changing the way ocean currents flow. Before all this ice melted, the water in the oceans moved around in a very particular way. Dense, salty water sank to the bottom of the ocean floor, pushing the less dense water up to the surface. Through this movement, the water acted like a giant conveyor belt, transporting heat and nutrients from one place to another. This is a key factor for the survival of marine life. Now, with fresh water from melting glaciers entering the picture, the water at the ocean's surface becomes less salty and dense and doesn't sink down as far. It's like our ocean conveyor belt has been jammed up. It's no longer able to move heat around from one place to another. Scientists warn that the melting of the Arctic will mess with the warm Gulf Stream. They're still figuring out how an Antarctic ice melt will change our climate. Under some circumstances, for instance, if icebergs broke from the Antarctic and melted further away in the Atlantic, the changes in ocean circulation could bring on an ice age. But if the melting primarily caused sea levels to rise, well, we'd probably just end up with a warmer Earth. And it's not just heat patterns that we need to worry about. Breaking the oceanic conveyor belt means problems with the movement of nutrients from the ocean floor to the surface. These nutrients are important for the growth of phytoplankton, tiny algae at the bottom of the ocean food chain. They may seem small and insignificant, but they're the bedrock of life in the ocean. They provide essential nutrients to marine life. But not all phytoplankton would suffer the same fate. For the phytoplankton around Antarctica's waters, the melting ice would provide iron and give them something rich to feast on. In fact, this event might lead to a temporary massive algae bloom as the waters are flooded with nutrients that were previously buried in the ice. The growth of the phytoplankton might be a good thing because at least they'll absorb a little carbon dioxide. The Earth will need that. Why? Well, because all this ice melting is going to make the planet a lot hotter for several reasons. First, ice helps keep Earth cooler through its super reflective surface. It's very effective at bouncing sunlight away from Earth's surface, which helps keep things cool. But once it's melted, that's a different story. With glaciers melting and the water warming, the activity of microscopic fungi in the water is also picking up. Just like dead leaves decompose in forests, microscopic fungi act on dead matter in the oceans, decomposing it and releasing carbon dioxide. Warmer oceans mean more dead matter gets decomposed, leading to more carbon dioxide being released. Now, on top of this, the melting glaciers create a layer of fresh water on top of the salty ocean water. This causes the oceans to be less efficient at removing carbon dioxide from the air, again, adding to the warming. And now, the rest of Antarctica is breaking up into humongous chunks and melting rapidly. Water from the melting ice pouring into the oceans. As the ice melts, something amazing is revealed. A natural wonder that's been hidden for millions of years.
an enormous canyon system, 100 kilometers longer than the Grand Canyon. It's the deepest canyon on Earth, running 3.5 kilometers below sea level and stretching all the way from the interior to the coast. And now you can also see the 15-million-year-old Lake Vostok, the 6th largest lake in the world by volume. And good news, with all the ice melted, you can picnic there. If you're still in the mood to picnic after everything the Earth is going through. Plus, you might want to stay away from the microorganisms living in the waters of Lake Vostok. They've been evolving there, isolated from the influences of our world for 15 million years. Who knows what they could do to your body? But there's no time to admire the canyon or peer at Lake Vostok because sea levels are rising, higher and faster than before. You're witnessing the last and most dangerous stretch. Every last chunk of ice is melted. Sea levels have risen over 70 meters. This rapid rise has caught people by surprise. 40% of the world's population, over 3 billion people, live near a coastline, and the vast majority of them have drowned as Antarctica's ice has melted in a matter of minutes. The entire Atlantic seaboard, including huge chunks of the United States, is gone, submerged underwater. People in skyscrapers as high as 23 stories are forced to race to the rooftop in a desperate bid to survive. Parts of California are transformed into bunches of little islands surrounded by water, and other parts of the state are completely gone. London, Paris, Venice, and every major coastal city we know and love is underwater. Millions of people are displaced, injured, or potentially dying from this catastrophic event. Anyone smart enough to jump in their car and flee inland as the water first started pouring onto land may have escaped with their lives if they could get to higher ground, but those are only a lucky few. Governments are in a panic, deploying emergency operations. They know that almost everyone on the coast is drowned, but maybe there's a way to rescue desperate people on top of skyscrapers. But with so many people affected, are there enough helicopters to even rescue these people? Boats would be needed. How will governments be able to replace all the destroyed infrastructure? More importantly, what will we do about the sudden lack of fresh water? With our fresh water mixed with salt water, humans now have a serious lack of drinking water. Suddenly, the land in the interior has become the hottest property. People living in the US Midwest are super happy they were never ever part of the wealthy coastal elite. Denver, Minneapolis, and Las Vegas are looking more attractive than ever before. Now, nations in the southern part of the globe are hit even harder. All of Bangladesh, with a population of 160 million people, is underwater. Geopolitical tensions rise as countries are looking for aid, but since so many places are hit, help is hard to come by. Now that all of the ice is gone, there's still another thing that has to melt: the permafrost. This is the soil that's been frozen at the poles for more than 40,000 years. As it thaws, it releases the carbon dioxide and methane that are trapped underneath it, causing the Earth to warm more and melt even more of the permafrost. As the permafrost thaws, it's as if someone popped a frozen dinner into the microwave. Tiny organisms start to munch on the freshly thawed ancient organic matter. As they do this, they fart out carbon dioxide and methane, which causes global temperatures to rise even more. Great, now we're breathing in microorganism farts and it's getting hotter. Worst scenario ever. Oh, but it can get even worse. In the midst of all this, it's possible that DNA viruses in the permafrost will thaw and kick off a global pandemic. Creating a vaccine in the midst of this catastrophe would be a challenge like never before. Plus, it's hot. Earth is 5 to 10 degrees Celsius warmer. The heat is what's driven the entire ice sheet to melt, but now these changes are making it even hotter. With the average temperature on Earth now almost 27 degrees Celsius,
a mass migration of people begins. The most popular spots? Well, Canada, Alaska, and the newly unveiled Arctic and Antarctic regions. These are the new tropical paradises. 34 million years ago, Antarctica was a temperate rainforest like New Zealand. Maybe that's going to happen all over again. Palm trees on the Antarctic coast and alligators swimming in the warm South Ocean. Thank goodness Antarctica is not actually melting in a matter of minutes. With coastal cities turning into watery graves, 3 billion people dead, our groundwater contaminated, more warming on the way, and maybe a global pandemic, I can't think of a worse situation. The sun is releasing massive spurts of energy that are headed directly toward Earth. And if they hit us, it could change everything. Power grids could be wiped out. Our communications could cease to exist. Humanity might be put back into the Stone Age. All because of a solar storm. But what makes them so powerful? How is it possible for something like this to happen in 2024? And why are they so dangerous? This is What If, and here's what would happen if a solar storm hit Earth in 2024. So, how could something like this happen anyway? Well, it all starts with the cycle of our sun. Known as the solar cycle, this is an 11-year stretch in which the sun's solar activity increases and decreases. The cycle starts with just a few sunspots raging about and creating mass amounts of energy, and then 5 or 6 years later, it reaches its peak with anywhere from 100 to 200 sunspots. Then it ramps back down for the last 5 years and we start another solar cycle. Currently, we're in our 25th cycle since we began tracking the sun in 1755. And unfortunately for us, scientists predict that the sunspots will peak in 2024. This means there's a higher chance that a solar storm will occur. Now, before we get to our solar storm, what are sunspots anyway? Well, they're cooler and darker areas of the sun that are created by a strong magnetic field. They're not directly responsible for creating solar flares, but it just so happens that flares are most common in these sunspots due to their high magnetic activity. The magnetic field lines can become twisted and tangled near certain parts of the sun, and they can suddenly snap and realign, which creates a massive burst of energy. This can result in a solar storm. So now that the sun has released this massive amount of energy, what will happen to you on Earth? Well, when a solar storm occurs, you won't notice it right away. That's because it takes a few minutes before it reaches Earth. And hurry up and get in your last couple of YouTube videos, because once this storm hits, everything changes. Now, the first thing you might notice is that more and more auroras will start popping up worldwide. This typically happens when charged particles from the solar storm interact with the Earth's atmosphere. Although these sights in the sky look beautiful, the good parts about a solar flare end there. Due to the effect on our geomagnetic field, most of our technology would stop working. Things like satellites, GPS, and radio transmissions would become incredibly spotty. Your cell phone likely wouldn't be able to pick up any signal, and communications worldwide would start to fade out or become less reliable. But that would only be if we were affected by a few solar flares. This is an entire solar storm we're talking about here. These are comprised of multiple attacks by the sun on the Earth. But before we get to that, people on Earth aren't the only ones affected by this. Astronauts up in space would also suffer the consequences. Their situation could be a lot worse. The sun would be blasting them with intense solar radiation, and if they're not in a specially shielded area on the spaceship, a solar storm could prove deadly. They could get radiation sickness, as well as develop cancer later on. The solar storm could also destroy their ability to communicate with their mission control, and vice versa. This is just what would happen on the first day of the solar storm, but several days later, as you're still having trouble getting cell reception, another massive attack would come from the sun. A phenomenon known as a coronal mass ejection, or CME for short, would be coming right for Earth. A CME is a massive explosion of plasma and electromagnetic radiation from the sun. This mass ejection can cause violent geomagnetic storms that interfere with Earth's magnetic field. If this were to happen, Earth as we know it could change for good. Just look at what happened in 1859. A solar storm known as the Carrington event occurred. It disrupted and flat out destroyed telegraph communications. Luckily, in this case, Earth was able to recover relatively quickly from what today would be a cataclysmic event. Telegraph communications were a simple technology. Telegraph lines could be repaired quickly and things went back to normal. But what would happen today? Our lives are so much more reliant on technology, and we have so much more of it. This time, the tech interruptions wouldn't just stop with the odd glitch or spotty signal. Instead, a solar storm could be so bad that it would make all technology stop working. Yeah, the intense levels of electromagnetic radiation could wipe out entire power grids and communication systems. Even something as simple as buying groceries with your credit card would be impossible. We're talking about a full-on global blackout. If you were in an airplane, the cockpit could lose communication with air traffic control and not know where to go. Or, with the intense radiation levels hitting Earth, the plane could fall entirely. The same goes for subways and trains. They could come to a complete stop in their tracks. This would cause catastrophes all around the world. Planes falling from the sky, trains crashing. Now, not having power at your house would be the least of the world's worries, because entire cities, including all hospitals, would be without power. No power means it's harder or impossible to treat certain patients. The lack of power and technology malfunctions could cause millions of people to die. The solar flares and CMEs might last anywhere from a couple of hours to a few days, but that doesn't mean this event would be over just yet. Because of all the damage to our power grids, communications, and technology, Earth would take some time to recover. It might be weeks or months before we get back to normal. We'd have to rebuild parts of our power grids and communication systems. And depending on the parts needed, well, this might take another several weeks. And take into account the lack of communication that the world would suffer. I mean, talking to your neighbors is one thing, but how would you communicate with another city or country? Global supply chains would collapse. This would delay things even further. But once humanity got all these things sorted, we would rebuild. What once felt like the end of humanity might turn into a simple footnote in Earth's history. The result of a solar storm could be traumatic and life-changing, but humans would live to see another day. So, how likely is something like this? Well, it's tough to predict. We can look at the solar cycles and see how many solar flares occur, but there's no telling if they'll hit Earth or not. And although a solar storm could happen, well, keep in mind that even though we're more reliant on technology than ever before, our technology is also more resistant. Communication technology and power grids are built to withstand various types of interference. NASA is also working on technology to help predict and warn us about solar flares. If one is headed our way, well, here's what you can do to prepare. Keep a well-stocked emergency and first aid kit nearby. Like with any natural disaster, it's important to be equipped with first aid equipment, non-perishable food, and water. You might want to invest in surge protectors and remember to unplug any electronics if a solar storm occurs. Lastly, look into off-grid power supplies, backup energy sources like generators or solar panels. Then just wait it out. The world should return to normal. But what if it never did? What if Earth experienced some of the
craziest world-ending scenarios ever. Well, that sounds like a story for another What If.
A tornado is about to hit an active supervolcano. What happens when this whirling column of air meets an outpouring of hot lava and ash? The results are devastating and terrifying. Would anyone survive this epic collision? And where is this most likely to happen? This is What If, and here's what would happen if a super tornado hit a super volcano.
Okay, quick brain fact. Did you know that curiosity is one of the only emotions that actually rewires your brain in real time? The moment you lean in to understand something, like you are right now, your neurons start building new pathways. When you watch curiosity-fueled content like this, your brain treats it like active learning, decoding and making sense of new ideas just like it does when you solve a puzzle. So, watching our shows is literally good for your brain. Well, that's why we launched the Popular Science Fast channel, where you can stream all our shows 24/7. Tune in any time of day and you'll find mind-bending science from us and from some of the world's leading creators, including NASA's spaceflight, Hacksmith, and Complexly. Plus, live rocket launches, documentaries, and deep dive specials. It's basically a non-stop feed of curiosity, always on, always learning. We're currently available on 10 different platforms, including Vizio, Roku, and Plex, but we're just getting started. We're reaching tens of millions of homes and streaming devices all over the globe, and that audience keeps growing every month. And the channel just keeps evolving. We're adding brand new series and specials monthly, from breakthroughs in tech to space exploration coverage you can watch live. It's a front row seat to the new space race, alongside a 150-year-old legacy of science storytelling, now being brought to streaming for the first time. So, if you ever finish one of these streams and still want more, well, you don't have to wait. You can jump straight into Popular Science and keep that curiosity going. It's there 24/7, ready whenever your brain wants its next aha moment.
Before I get into exactly what would happen if these two natural disasters collided, let's take a look at what makes each of them so deadly. Twisters and tornadoes are vertical columns of air that extend from a thunderstorm down to the ground, and they're spinning very, very fast. They have an average wind speed of 48 kilometers per hour. Only about 1 in 5,000 thunderstorms give rise to a tornado. A tornado forms when warm air hits cold air. The warm air rises and winds whirl it around vertically. The most supercharged thunderstorms, called supercells, produce the most destructive tornadoes. Your average tornado is about 200 meters wide, and luckily for us, these things don't move very far. A tornado might only travel for about 10 kilometers before dying out. But, like I say, that's an average tornado. With a more destructive EF5 tornado, wind speeds can reach a deadly 320 kilometers per hour, launching debris as far away as 65 kilometers. Okay, now that we know what kind of twister we're dealing with, let's see what happens when it meets a volcano. Then we'll up the stakes and see just how crazy things can get. Could the tornado whip up the lava from a volcano and create a fire tornado? Let's say a tornado is traveling at 48 kilometers per hour toward a volcano. Well, not much would happen. It would just skim over the surface and quickly die out. But what if the wind picks up? Well, then things can get action-packed pretty quickly. For instance, take the eruption of Mount Kilauea in 2023. While there wasn't a massive super-volcano type of explosion, a series of eruptions pushed millions of tons of lava into the crater. The temperature was 1,200 degrees Celsius, giving rise to a hot wind that swirled about like a mini tornado. This whipped up chunks of lava and rocks. Now, if an EF3 tornado had developed right over this volcano, it would have destroyed everything nearby.